Today is Titan Tuesday. We are going to break down the lessons from a business titan and try and learn what we can from what they did and how we can apply it to our lives. Today's titan is known for being ruthless, is known for being very cheap and cost effective, and is known for being quiet and playing his cards close to his chest. He is a historical titan, and he is known for also changing the entire oil industry. We'll get into exactly who that is soon. I break down complex business news and make it simple for high-income earners. This is something that I wish someone did for me. This is The Will Whiten Show. First off, please go ahead, hit the like button. Also, subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Hit the notification bell so that you can be notified every time I post. In addition to that, if you find what I am doing of value, please share it with someone who you think could get a great use out of watching this. Please do that. It really helps for the YouTube algorithm. Without further ado, let's get into today's business titan on Titan Tuesday. You may have guessed who it is already. It is John D Rockefeller. Yes, the father of the modern oil industry. And we're going to get into many of his habits, but we're going to focus on one in particular and then talk about how we can apply that to our own lives. So, a bit of background. John D Rockefeller, he made a big splash in the oil industry, and he lived by the motto of trying to just get big fast because he knew it was a ruthless industry. He knew you needed a lot of leverage, and he always approached everything as if he was in a battle, a fight to the death. He always thought what he was doing was a matter of survival. He had many other traits. We could do many episodes on John D Rockefeller. He was known to be quiet, very observant. He tried not to share too much information, but he tried to collect as much information as he could. And he was also known for being cooperative. He truly believed that if he was able to amass tons of control in the oil space and collect the brightest minds in the oil space, they would all be better for it, as opposed to trying to club each other to death in the oil and gas industry. And I'll give you an example of this. But at the end of the day, and the trait that we're going to dig into, is that he always thought that he was in a battle. He always thought that he was at war. Let's get into an example. So John D Rockefeller had bought out a refinery, I believe when he was 24 years old. He was very young. And I think this is also just a side note that there's been just an incredible, infantilization of kids nowadays and people over the last 100 years. You'll read some of these amazing stories, and people accomplished, amazing things in their 20s that you may not expect someone to do until they're in their 40s now or something like that. Obviously, it was a different time. There was less regulations, and there was also more kind of unexplored frontiers of business and industries. And so maybe it lent more to that. But it also seems to me that people as a whole are babied for a lot longer in their life. Everything's drawn out. The secondary education through high school is drawn out. They now go to higher education. People go on to get master's degrees. You could stay on your parents' health insurance until you're 26 or something like that. And that just wasn't the case back then. Oftentimes, people left home much before the age of 18. And John D Rockefeller's upbringing, his parents were actually very forceful in trying to make him grow up. He had grown up in more of a rural setting, and his father actually took him to the nearest major city when he was 14 years old and told him to figure it out and left him there. So I'm not suggesting that if you have a 14-year-old, go take them to a city and tell them to figure it out. But it's just an example of how different things were. It's very difficult to put yourself in that mindset of what a different time, place, and world it was that he grew up in. So if we get back to his story, about how he got his first refinery at the age of 24, he had quickly realized that he is in a fight to the death. It is very difficult to manage refineries. The margins are very thin. And in order to make up for this, you have to, one, run an efficient operation, but that alone may not save you. You have to find other ways to try and maintain your profits. And one of those ways is to try and negotiate favorable freight rates. Well, and in this case, this is talking about rail freight, so to move crude oil or to move refined product. Now, this obviously, he realized, is a lot easier to do if you are bigger, if you can exert more leverage and get more negotiating power over the railroads, if you have more supply, more freight traffic to negotiate with. And so he started to buy up other refiners. And in fact, there was a 4-week period, and this was in Ohio, that he bought out 23 other refiners to try and gain size. And his pitch to these refiners wasn't aggressive necessarily. It wasn't a buyout, take this or else, although in some cases he might have said, take this deal or I'll crush you. And he certainly was able to do that as he got bigger. But he would offer them cash or stock in his new oil company. And he would say, you will stay on, you still get to be your own person and run your own refinery. Come to the headquarters, a few times a year, and we'll go over the overall strategy. But you still more or less get to be in control. If you accept the stock deal, you can still be an owner in the company, and we will then get better freight rates because I will have the negotiating power with the railroads. And he was ultimately successful, like I said, in buying up 23 what would have been competing refineries. So there's a little bit of carrot and stick here, but at the basis of his understanding, and in fact, many of his private writings constantly mention that he is in a battle. There's a battle that he is contending with, and he talks through all sorts of battles. This is just one example that he came up with and said, hey, I'm in a battle against all these other refineries, and I'm not here to compete, and we need to get as big as possible, as quickly as possible. And he took that more cooperative approach. So that's one example of a fight that he thought he was in and how he decided to win it. And then obviously, when he was now representing 24 refiners, he's able to have better rates. Now, another example is that he created an industry group of refiners, ones that he hadn't quite bought yet, and maybe he was competing with, or maybe were in different areas of the country. This is as he was getting bigger, and they shared their books with him, even though he was running what could be a competing refinery. And so at that point, he was able to negotiate freight rates on behalf of this consortium of refineries that weren't under his direct control. And he was able to see all their books and get them favorable rates. And then he also used that as a means to decide who he wanted to buy further. So you can say that there were some immoral tactics, and probably in this day and age, there were probably some illegal tactics. This was, think about, the Wild West of business back in the 1800s when he was doing this. And so I don't necessarily fault him for that. Many of the laws that we have today didn't exist back then. So it's easy to look back and say, oh, well, what he's doing would have been illegal. In many cases, there wasn't even the concept of certain things that he was doing as to whether they should be illegal or not. Many people were just trying to really get their arms around this new industry and the new demand that was coming for oil. But he had a relentless consistency, and he always thought that he was in the fight of his life. So let's take this home. Let's take this to ourselves. And this may be incredibly stressful. So you don't have to do this, okay? If you think this is going to stress you out. But one way to approach your life is to view it that you yourself are at war. And that war could be any number of things. And in fact, you're probably fighting multiple wars right now and not even realize it. So for example, your health. You could be in a war against your health right now. You could be not eating well and not realizing the damage that it's doing, or maybe understanding the damage that it's doing, but then just kind of ignoring it and not taking action. You could be in a war of attention, because there is a war being waged for your attention. Think about all the different mediums, all the different social media apps, all the different TV shows and movies, whatever it is, all the different hobbies. It doesn't even have to be, an electronic distraction and a different show like the news or something. This could be a hobby that's distracting you. It could be any number of things. And all of these things are competing for your attention and the dollars in your wallet. And at the end of the day, it is up to you to decide whether you are going to fight or not, and how you are going to do that. Obviously, I don't mean physical fighting. I don't mean going to fight someone who's trying to sell you something or anything like that. But there is a war for your attention, a war for your dollars. And my view is that if I am not actively trying to counteract that, then I am losing. Right? Basically, if I'm not recognizing that I'm fighting the war, then I've already lost the war, right? I've basically given up. So there could be a war against your health. There could be a war for your attention. There could be a war for your dollars. At your job, there can be a war for a promotion. Sometimes promotions take 3 years to set up. It takes consistent work. It takes meeting with different people in a company. It takes showing them all your different skills. It takes the proper positioning. And if you're thinking, well, maybe I just work hard and a promotion will come along, there's a good chance that it might not. And there's also a chance that there's someone else in your company that does recognize that they are at a war and they are taking all the necessary steps such that when a job opens up or when a promotion opportunity opens up, that they are positioned to get that promotion. If you're not thinking about that, someone else might be. So one other area could be in relationships, right? You may not realize it, but you may be in a war to maintain and improve your relationship, whether it be with a girlfriend or boyfriend or a spouse, right? Think about if someone else came along and treated them very well and gave them gifts and said nice things and really respected them for who they were and tried to build them up. And think about all these things. Think about, the ideal spouse or something in your head. Think about if someone came along and tried to do that to the person that you're interested in. Do you think today, would you win that battle or not? Would the person that you're, trying to pursue, or maybe you're in a relationship with and trying to make it better, would you win that battle? Are you doing the necessary things for them to look at you and say, no, I'm far better off with you. I love you more and you treat me better. These are things that you can ask yourself. And especially if you are a high income earner, there are far fewer high income jobs than you realize. And the ones that are out there, for the most part, you may not be skilled for. So if you have one, do not take it for granted, because it may not be as easy to replace as you think. Try and picture yourself in a war for maintaining that and getting the next job. Because at the same time, you're not just competing with someone else at your level that's looking for the next job. You're competing with new grads and new people that are rising through the ranks at your company that may want your job. And at a certain point, they may be performing as well as you, but willing to do it for less money than you. And then that puts you in a precarious position. And all along you're thinking, well, I'll just work hard and perhaps I'll get promoted, when really the ice below your feet could be starting to melt and get thinner. I in no way mean to stress you out. If this approach stresses you out, you can ignore it. I think this is an approach that I try to take sometimes. Sometimes I forget it and I don't take this approach and I'm forgetful about it. But I think it is beneficial when I do take this approach. And this is something that, as we talked about, John D Rockefeller, one of the greatest business minds to have ever lived and built an undisputed massive empire and changed the entire oil industry and all the industries that it touched. This is an approach that he took. Is it manic? Possibly. Is it extremely stressful? Sure. But it's a way, there's a saying that only the paranoid survive, right? And I didn't read anything specifically that necessarily said he was paranoid, but I think the strategy lends to paranoia, right? Because he's not in his approach was not a rest on your laurels approach. It was, I am at war. We must get bigger. We must negotiate better rates. And we must be able to use scale to our advantage. We must do it fast, or it could spell disaster for us. So that's something that we can learn from him, and that is how we can try and apply it to our lives. Thank you for listening. Have a good night.